Everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And this time out, we're going to take a look at another plugin. This is a pretty cool one. This is by the good folks over at Pulsar Audio in collaboration with Mark Daniel Nelson. This is the P455 MDN, which is really kind of like a summing, kind of a two-bus plugin with a lot of cool features that is based on Mark's API Sidecar that he has, the hardware version, in his studio. Again, I'll link his studio tour video in the description box below if you want to check out all the cool gear that Mark has in his studio, including the hardware version of this. So we're going to listen to this on a two-bus, also some drums, and just walk through the plugin and check this out. And I'll leave the links in the description box so you can check it out. This is not a sponsored video. I'm just in demo mode. You can demo this for 15 days, and that's exactly what I'm doing. No one gave this to me or anything like that. So this is just my first time kind of playing with it. I've seen Mark's overview video, which again, I'll link in the description box below, so he could take you through all the dirty details. We'll go over the plugin, but he goes over it in a lot greater depth and tells you some of the thinking behind the creation of this and some of the back and forth he had with the developers and stuff and how they arrived at where they arrived. So that's what we're going to do today. But before we get started, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and get that free mixing course. It is right on the homepage. You cannot miss it. It's my gift to you just for visiting Home Recording Made Easy. And if you stick around till the end of the video, I'm going to give you something else for free. So here we are, all in its glory. This is the P455 MDN. Now they have an EQ version of this. This is like a two-part plugin. You get the sidecar and the EQ, which we're going to look at in another video. So let's just take a look at the sidecar. Let's walk through the controls. So we start up here at the very top here. We have our phase flip meter here, our button. We have a gain reduction meter here, which is when we get to the compressor. That's what happens here. You get your gain reduction from this little digital readout at top, not on the VU meters. We have a bunch of presets here that we can maybe check out and you can check out as well, which is cool. We have over here, we can save presets and we can compare presets. It's like a typical plugin. We also have this mod 1 and mod 2. And I believe what this does is this changes some of the op amps inside from an emulation point of view, give it a little bit of a different flavor. We have the GUI here, and we have this new button and old button. If you click this, you'll see that it ages the look of the GUI, which is kind of cool. The only other person that I've seen do that was the Voost EQ. We did a few weeks ago. You can check the archive where they have that kind of a feature where you can go new and go old. Like, pretty cool, right? Nice. I'll stay on old because that's kind of cool. Then we have this little menu that we can drop down here where you can get the user guide if you want. You can set the defaults. You could set this as our default size, and you can resize the plugin by dragging. Oh, geez Louise, look at that. Let me open this up again. My bad. Where you can resize the plugin and then you can set it as a default. Then we have our view meters, really nice, really big. We could take global in and out. We have an input to drive the input. The harder you drive the input, the more coloration stuff you're going to get. That's pretty standard. We have a bias adjustment here, which we'll take a listen to after. We also have this mode of 8-channel or 8-channel summing or 2-channel summing. My guess is, is that actually what changes the modification? Does that change the mod? Let's see. No, it doesn't. Okay, so on the 8-channel, you have mod 1, mod 2. On the 2-channel, the mod button goes away. Interesting. And you can read the manual if you want to learn all the inner workings. Let's just go over this. In the center, we have our nice API EQ, which is based on the 5500, which Mark has a couple of those hardware units in his studio. I have one of those hardware units in my studio. The API 5500 EQ is fantastic. So we can take that in and out by clicking this button here. We also have these little toggle switches in here, which gives us a multiplier on the frequency that we're on. So for example, right now it's 1 time. So if I'm going 30 Hertz, 40 Hertz, 50 Hertz, right? And then if I'm using my dBs here, 2 dB, 4 dB, 6 dB, right? If I go to the half, let me flip that in the middle. Now I'm only going in half increments. So instead of a 2 dB step, this is 1 dB steps. See that? And then if I go 0.25, if you really want to get more finite here, we can go in half dB increments. So that's a pretty cool feature to have. So we have a 4-band EQ here. We have an output level here. As you're boosting stuff, you can go ahead and trim it down here. We have our low cut and high cut, or low pass and high pass filters here in buttons, which is kind of cool. Okay, you can turn them on and off like that. Underneath that, we have a compressor. Now this compressor, according to Mark, says that, because some people, I guess, thought it was based on a Fairchild, but he said it's really based on 3 compressors kind of all jumbled into one. A Fairchild, an API 2500, and I forget the other one that he said. You can go watch the video. But this is meant to be a very mild amount of compression with a very slow attack and more of a faster release to kind of, you know, work well on a 2-bus. Even though you can compress a little harder, this is more for mild compression. And again, your gain reduction meter here is at the top, and we have a little gain reduction light here. We have a threshold, attack, release, and output. We have ratio A and ratio B. And again, I'd have to read the manual to know the exact ratio times. I believe Mark said it's like 1.8 to 1 and like 2 to 1, something like that. It's very small ratios. Again, this is not like a 4 to 1, 6 to 1 kind of a thing. You could take it in and out here, and then you have a side chain filter here, which sets it at 80 Hertz as a side chain if you want to do that. Over on the right-hand side, we have our 2 big output meters here, which is kind of cool. All right, we can do that. And my guess is if you click, yes, if you click on, hold your option key on a Mac and click, it'll bring it to Unity. And then at the top here, we have these 2 toggles, chicken knob switches here. We have our analog. Now this is based on 2 different A to D converters. I don't know which ones, but he has one called Willie and one called Atticus. The way Mark describes it is Willie is going to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more tougher. The Atticus is going to be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more tame, if you will. Well, we'll take a listen to that. That's probably in a real subtle way. And then we could turn the line amp on and off here as well. And again, when you turn the line amp on and off, you can see the mod kind of goes away, which is kind of cool. And that's it. So it's a pretty fully featured plugin. It's got a lot of different things here, but in the end, how does it sound? Because that's all that matters. So what we have up here is we have the same song we used in the last video when we did the Fuse Audio, where we put the SSL quick strip on there. I left these settings here. So we got a little bit of a mix happening. Again, we kind of dialed this in quick in the last video. And what I did is I threw this just on the master bus here. So we're going to listen to this on the master bus, and we're going to play around with it and see what it does. So here we go. Let's listen to this and just see what the hell does it do? I'm just pushing it in, hitting it a little harder here. We're gonna go even a little harder, turning down the output here so we can level match it. It gives it a little bit of compression. So I instantly hear a low end bump right away. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, which is really cool. We're not doing any gain reduction. We're not using the EQ. Everything's at its default setting, but just listen to the low end, the bass and the kick. So that's the first thing. Now, before we get to the EQ, let's play around with this analog. Let's see if we can hear the difference between these 2 converters. Now, again, someone who has tested lots of converters, there's a lot of people out there that have, you know, that claim that they can hear the most minute differences between these converters and stuff. And most of these things are so super subtle, I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but let's see. We're going to start on Willie, which is supposed to be more aggressive. Then we're going to flip to Atticus and go back and forth. Here we go. Okay, so what I hear, I don't know what it's going to sound like over YouTube with all the YouTube compression and whatnot, but I'll tell you, I could hear it. It is a little subtle. Where I hear it the most, let me just slide this over for a second. I'm going to turn up the snares a little bit louder than normal. Maybe I can get you guys to hear this a little. We're going to make the snare loud. Where I hear it the most is I'm listening to the transient of the snare. That's where I'm kind of listening. So let's listen to that. The snare is going to be, you know, out of balance, but let's see if we can hear it if we just focus on the snare. I mean, it's subtle and you may not be able to hear it over YouTube. So I'll just tell you that it is incredibly subtle, but I feel like with the Willie, you get a little bit more point, a little bit more aggression, a little bit more crack on the snare. And now I'm talking subtle, where the Atticus seems a little bit rounder to me, just a little tiny bit rounder. So I'm gonna put it on we're on the 8-channel mode. Let's put it on the 2-channel mode. I'm playing with the line amp is on here. And I wanna just play with the bias and see what that kind of does. Again, super, super subtle. You may not hear that over YouTube. As I go more clockwise, it seems like it gets a little bit more in the upper mids, a little bit more open, just a little bit. Not much though. I got to tell you, it's super subtle. You may not hear this over YouTube. Okay, let me bring down the snare level a little bit here again to something that's more reasonable. Again, this is not a proper mix as it were, but... Okay, let's play with the EQ a little bit. Let's, I don't know, let's mess around. Here we go. And on the low frequency, we can use a peaking or a shelving here with this little toggle. Give us a little bit more kick drum here. So what I will say about the EQ section, unlike the hardware, the more you push the top end of this EQ, it could get a little bit too much of this. On the hardware, it doesn't. But it sounds like the hardware. It's got that API thing. Especially on the low end. That 50 Hertz, I have it strapped across my SSL drum bus. I use this all the time, these settings right here on the drum bus. We'll listen to it on drums in a minute. 50 Hertz, 4.6 dB bump, sounds magical. And we can turn down, so we did some boosting, so we can pull down some of the level here at the EQ. Great, let's turn on the compressor. Let's see what we got here. We're ratio A, we're not doing any compression yet. Let's pull back the threshold. So ratio A has a greater ratio. I don't know the exact, I should have got it out the manual, but the ratio A is going to be a little bit less compression. Ratio B is going to be a little bit more compression. So we're doing about 1.5 dB, 1.1 dB of compression. Let's see if we can compress it a little more. Yeah, it even seems like it's too much. Like this is really meant to be on a master bus. And I think Mark said in his video, he does like less than a dB, like 0.5 dB at compression maybe. I know he said it's not based on a Fairchild 1-to-1. It's like it's a kind of an accumulation of a few different compressors that he has. I will say it sounds Fairchild-esque a little bit, but it also has a very API 2500 kind of a vibe too. I think this compressor done too much on a master bus, like with any master bus compressor, 2-bus compressor, you're not gonna compress 6 dB. It's usually a dB, 0.5 dB, a couple of dB, maybe at most. And that's where I think this sounds good, at least on this particular track that we're listening to. So I like ratio A way better. I mean, just turning this whole thing on and off at this point makes a huge, huge difference. We probably got a little bit too much top end in here, but. So interesting. So the difference between the 2-channel and the 8-channel, again, I focus in on the transient stuff to say I could get my ear dialed into it and pick it up. Listen to the crack, the point of the snare. On the 8-channel, it's more rounded off. Maybe because it's got more summing. It's, 8 channels of summing. So you have the emulation of 8 channels of analog kind of maybe compressing a little bit more. On the 2-channel, it's a little bit more open sounding, a little bit more punchy. I mean, it sounds great. What I like about this is that it's different. It's different. It's modeled on a very customized, if you will, specific piece of hardware in Mark's studio that you just can't go get anywhere. You can't just go buy that Sidecar, I wouldn't think. And it's got enough variety in it that regardless of the program material, you can make this as subtle or as aggressive or as obvious or at least obvious as you want. And the thing that I always say to people when we talk about plugins. And again, I feel for plugin companies because, you know, all these plugin companies that are making emulations of the classic gear, everyone's done it. It's all been done pretty much. How many 1176s are there out there? Emulations. How many LA2As, Pultex, Fairchilds? You get what I mean? Some are better than others, but there's a million of them and they all sound pretty much the same, even channel strips. So it's hard for me to look at new plugins and get really excited because everything's already been done. In this example, this is different because this is, yes, it's an API with a kind of a combination of a few different really cool compressors that are kind of, you know, blended together with some converter flavors that are subtle but are definitely there. And this is something a little different on a very unique piece of hardware that you just can't go buy, like you just can't go buy an 1176, right? So I think it's cool. It's different. And on a 2-bus, I think you got a ton of variety in here. I can absolutely see when mixing in the box using this on the 2-bus all the time. Now, what about just on like something like drums? Well, let's just dial something in quick with drums, now that we've been through the plugin. And I'll shut it off on the master bus and I'll turn it on the drum bus. Turn down the kicks a little bit. Oh yeah, big difference. You can hear that difference more so now that we're just soloing up the drums between the 2-channel and the 8-channel. I dig the 2-channel quite a bit. So you could even hear it again. Listen to the snare drum. Okay, I'm glad we're doing it on drums here because now you can really start to hear the differences. In a whole mix, it's hard because you got all the stuff kind of piled on top of each other. But I love doing these kinds of plugins on drums because of the transients. It's easier to hear. You could hear the snare, you could hear the kick and the snare transient a lot more aggressive with the Willie than the Atticus. So it's not as subtle in this example that it is on the master bus. Sounds really good. Let me pull out a little 500 here. Get some compression happening. Way more grabby on ratio B. I could see using this on drum bus too. I could see this using on drum bus too. This sounds great. This is great. This is great. Cool plugin. Check out the link in the description box. You can demo it for 15 days for free. Again, it's not an affiliate. I'm demoing it. They didn't give it to me. I don't have to say anything nice about this thing. Again, I like it because it's super versatile and it has that API thing for sure. It's musical. You have enough different combinations of adjustments that can really sweeten up the pie, if you will, or you could do it very, very subtle, which is really great. Again, it's unique. It's not like every other plugin that's out there, and that's why I dig it. So I encourage you to go check out the P455 MDN. Mark Daniel Nelson, great engineer, one of my heroes. Really dig his stuff that he does with Produce Like a Pro and SSL and a bunch of other different companies. He does lots of videos on YouTube. Again, I'll link the studio tour he did with Warren Hewitt about a year ago of his studio tour, and they show the hardware of this among some of the other things that he uses. Check him out. If you don't know, I'm sure you know who he is, but if you don't know who he is, go check him out because he's really cool. And he has a really cool studio. So anyway, thank you so much for taking a look and listen to this with me today. As I said at the beginning, I want to give you something else for free. So again, go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, get that free mixing course. Again, it's right on the homepage. You cannot miss it. It's my gift to you. Take that course. And if you really dig my style of teaching and you'd like to take one of my other full featured courses that's paid, I want to give you a 25% discount coupon code. That coupon code is YouTube25. That'll take 25% off any training course on the website. Also, if you're into mixing, we talk about plugins and this sort of thing. If you're into mixing and you're a beginner or intermediate mixer and you want to get better at the craft of mixing the fastest way possible, check out what I have going on at mixingmadeeasy.net. All the links will be in the description box below. And until the next video where we take a look at some more plugins, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com and mixingmadeeasy.net. Thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. And I'll see you in the next video.